everyone. I'm Candace Still Flippin, the Chief Communications Officer for First Horizon. Welcome. We're so excited to be here today to kick off this Celebrate What's Right luncheon series with a virtual edition. We're really excited about our panel today. We're going to talk about music in Memphis. First Horizon Foundation is really proud to celebrate what's right with New Memphis and Blue Cross Blue Shield and all of you today. We have a long-standing partnership with New Memphis Institute, and we really value the work that they do to bring thoughtful information to help develop our leaders here in our city. Today, we believe that we can continue to shine a light even during this global pandemic because it calls for celebrating what's right about our community and our local champions. And we're really excited to talk with our leaders today who are going the extra mile to help uplift our city. Today, we're going to talk about music, and what better place, what better city to talk about music than Memphis. It's unique. We have a very strong cultural heritage in music, and our legacy is known around the globe. It helps shape our future, it helps grow our economy, and it helps expand the infrastructure that brings people all around the world to our great city. And so we're going to dive right into that today with our very impressive panel. I wish I could be with you in person, but virtually, please welcome James Dukes, AKA IMAKEMADBEATS, the founder of Unapologetic, Jayne Ellen White, the music specialist of Memphis Tourism, Dr. Ken Steorts, the founder and president of Visible Music College, Tonya Dyson, the executive director of Memphis Slim Collaboration, Robert Bob Moody, the music director of the Memphis Symphony Orchestra. And our panel today will be moderated by Nora Murphy, the community engagement manager of New Memphis Institute. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Candace. I want to be sure that we thank our generous sponsors. We've partnered, as she mentioned, with First Horizon Foundation and with Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee for several years now. They've been tremendous supporters of our work and tremendous advocates for our community. So we're so grateful to have their partnership on this. And we'll be sure to drop the links to both our panelists' pages for their organizations and for Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee and First Horizon Foundation in the chat as well if you're interested in learning more about them. So to echo Candace's statements, we're thrilled to have our panelists here today as we explore education, equity, and economics as it relates to our music industry in Memphis, especially today in this ever-changing environment with everything that's going on with the COVID-19 pandemic. I'll do a few housekeeping notes just before we get started so we're all on the same page. So if you all want to just mute yourself, mute your mics, and go off video so we can be sure to give our full attention to our panelists today, that would be great. It also means that you can grab some lunch without fear of like crunching sounds or how you look on camera while eating. If you do want to participate, we encourage you to drop questions into our chat. We'll leave some time at the end so that you can ask questions of our panel today. So make sure you do that as you have them. And last but not least, if you are not currently following New Memphis on social media, please do so. We'll drop those links in the chat as well. And so that way you can keep up to date on events like this, as well as what's to celebrate around our city. So we'll start with our panel now. So I'll have each of our panelists start by stating your name and how you would describe Memphis music in 3 words or less, and no repeats. So if Jayne, if you want to start first.
Sure. Hi, guys. I'm Jayne Ellen White with Memphis Tourism, and I am the music specialist. And 3 words for Memphis music, I'm going to say recognizable, influential, and from a Black experience.
I like it. What about Tonya?
3 words. Ooh. Okay, so Memphis music, dope as hell. Yay.
I love it. I love it. All right, Ken, let's hear from you.
Well, I'd say they got that groove.
Okay, I like that. And James, or IMAKEMADBEATS, let's hear from you.
Yeah, IMAKEMADBEATS, founder of Unapologetic. I would say daring. I was gonna say influential, but Jayne got me there, so I'm gonna switch that up to innovative.
Okay.
And then I'm also gonna say now.
Oh, I like that. Very relevant. And last but certainly not least, Robert, let's hear from you.
Yeah, hey, I'm Robert Moody. I'm the music director of Memphis Symphony. And I mean, the first thing that came to my mind when you asked the question was Memphis has funk, F-U-N-K. But yeah, I mean, out of the box. I mean, you know, this is, there's too many words, but unique, out of the box, Memphis has funk. F-U-N-K.
Like it. Mine that I had was like nowhere else. So I think we're all kind of on the same page with, you know, only find it in Memphis, and it's relevant and current and innovative and highly spirited. So I love it. So next we'll dive in a little bit deeper. How do you think the culture of an area reflects and determines the kind of music it produces? So the innovation, the Memphis as funk, the now, what do you think all goes into creating that kind of music? Let's start with Tonya on this one.
Well, of course, you know, I'm a lover of soul music, and of course blues and gospel and all those things that kind of made soul. So looking at the previous history of Memphis and looking at a lot of the what would be considered bad things, as far as the poverty, even the racism in a lot of cases, so many of the negatives, Memphis music was able to take those negatives and word them and put them into a song, and to kind of tell the plight all over the world. And that was a way that Memphis musicians could connect with so many people, you know, even people that did not look like them, did not have the same background as them, not even, you know, in most cases ethnicity or even religion as them, but they can all connect on that common ground. And so Memphis music was just basically able to take a lot of the negatives that came along with being in the Bible Belt, you know, being in the Deep South, being in a highly impoverished area, and kind of change that and, you know, morphed it into something beautiful in essence.
Yeah, that's a really great point of taking some of the things that are not so shiny or bright and kind of putting it into a song or a feeling that everyone can relate to.
Right.
Ken, what do you think?
Well, I totally agree that the struggle of an area kind of gets into its music, and we definitely see that in Memphis. I'd say that maybe just even further, the sophistication and expectation of the shine of something, you know, sort of the metropolitan, you know, feel is missing, which is a really positive part of Memphis. Not that we can't be polished, but it's just, it leaves room for the raw, the organic, the energy, closer to the artist, really, to me. And it's not as, there's not that expectation you might have if this was Las Vegas or something, to draw a crazy parallel. Yeah. So I love the grit and the originality and the rawness of music here.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Robert, how do you think the classical arts fit into all of that?
Well, I'm a bit of a newbie, probably in the grand scheme of things. This is my 4th year as music director of Memphis Symphony. Although I started, first time I came as a guest conductor was in 2005, and I was invited to be the conductor for the Elvis Presley birthday concert. So actually, that was the year Harley Davidson did this thing with Graceland. So I got to ride out on stage at the Cannon Center on a limited edition Elvis Presley Harley. I promise you that was not something I thought about when I was studying classical music in my life. To your the whole question and thought about how does, you know, the culture in a specific area affect music, I think they are inextricably linked. I think they are completely dependent upon each other, connected to each other. It's the history of an area, it's the culture of an area, it's the good, the bad, the ugly, all the stories of an area. but it's also you don't hear it as readily now with technology and industry, but it's the sounds of the Mississippi River. It's the sounds of the beat of human beings walking through downtown or Front Street or Midtown, or all of that comes together to make the music we have. So when I first got here, someone said to me a quote that I love: if music were a religion, Memphis would be Jerusalem, because so many different styles. Now I'm finally coming back to what you said about classical music. I believe that great music is great music is great music. I couldn't care less about label. I think you'll find that most every musician that I know doesn't really care if something's called classical or country or R&B or blues or bluegrass. If it's great, it's great. If it's not, we probably don't want to be that involved with it. And if you take a look at what we're doing at the Memphis Symphony, we are having the most fun, especially pre-COVID, but COVID's making us be creative. But we are having the most fun these past few years, figuring out ways to bring completely unexpected musical styles together. We just put Stravinsky Soldier's Tale and Robert Johnson Blues mashed together into one performance. And it wasn't like we did the music of one, then the next. We put it together, a little bit of one, a little bit of the next. This is the kind of stuff that got me so excited when I got the job in Memphis, because it is like Jerusalem for music, and we do get to put it all together. So last word, and then I'll shut up. My mission is to make people look at me and or the Memphis Symphony and not think, oh, there's the classical music people. No, they think there's another part of the really cool music people who are involved in making great music in the community.
Yeah, that's a great note about how it can all be interconnected no matter what, genre of music that you're talking about. James, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think, just piggybacking off of what Robert said, I don't think you can tear the two apart, culture and the music that it creates. I think culture is the seed of any art, any creation. It's a direct line injection into it. I think the thing that makes Memphis even more special regarding that dynamic is there's something about the Memphis culture that affects our music in a way that we don't care what anybody else is doing. And I say that as a kid who traveled a lot, in his childhood. I'm first generation American on my mom's side. I've seen other continents. And, one of the beautiful things about Memphis culture in general is how much we just do what we're doing. What LA's doing, what New York's doing, what Nashville, whatever, who cares? That's what y'all are doing, and that's great. But in Memphis, we're doing this. And that shows up in our music. And in a way that becomes a kind of incubation boiling pot of sounds and fusions that are generally ahead of their time. And then 20 years later, it's the sound of the industry. So Memphis has a history of doing that.
Yeah, for sure. And then Jayne, do you want any last minute notes on that?
I think everybody covered it. We have a strong history here of going through things, and a lot of times art is cathartic and healing, and we've always been, I think, creating, things from that space, and it shows.
Definitely. So, hearing that we are one of a kind in our music, which I think many, if not all of us know already, what are the economic impacts of that Memphis music? I mean, I know some of you touched on, where we came from in the past, and some of you talked about what we're doing now, and how those two pieces are even connected. So what are some of the economic impacts? You want to take it, James?
Sure. So there definitely is an economic impact, right? But I think where I would like to see conversations dwell is what is that impact and who does that impact, right? When we talk about the music here, and we talk about the people who create that music here and has consistently made this place a special place to be and visit, a special place to come from other places and leave a whole bunch of money here and go home, right? When we talk about the people who have actually made this place that, how are those people doing, right? How have they been impacted by how they have historically made this city great? And if they are impacted in a positive way, is it proportional to the impact that they gave the city? And I think that that's the beginning of that conversation. And I'll gladly Gary Payton that off to somebody else.
No, it's a really excellent point, for sure. It sounds like, you know, it's definitely a success area for Memphis in some ways, but we have huge opportunity to grow as well. And so, Tonya, if you want to jump in about some of those ways that we could grow and move forward for a better tomorrow, what's your perspective?
With perspective on the economic impact of Memphis music, or growing from that?
A little of both.
Okay. Okay. So, so of course, I guess the economic impact of Memphis, of course, anyone that's working and producing impacts the economy, regardless of any type of industry. So one of the biggest things that I've always been advocating is the fact that Memphis looks at its creative class as a positive economic contributor. A lot of people look at music like, hey, that's music, you're singing part-time, but this is a lot of people's lives. So on top of them singing, they're writing songs, they have industry, they may be running sound and lights. It's so many different aspects and so many jobs and so many ways to make money within the industry. And people are here actively doing it, support be damned, they're here doing it and creating these different avenues. And of course, what our old mantra of gritting and grinding it out in a sense, that's what Memphis is essentially been about. But as far as the economic impact, it contributes greatly. Now, whether we as a collective, as a city, or as a unit has done a great job at charting those numbers and looking at those numbers and really paying attention to how much of that money that's generated from music, how much of that is reinvested into the creators, how much of that, again, piggybacking off of what IMAKEMADBEATS said, how much of that money is going back into the creators' pockets. It's okay to have an industry, but of course, if you aren't funding the people that are keeping the industry and driving the industry going, then pretty soon you won't really have an industry. But there is a very strong economic impact, and I would love to see some type of impact study actually done on Memphis music, all inclusive, genres, colors, races, everything, kind of just looking at where Memphis has music and how Memphis and Memphians take in their music on a daily basis would be an interesting thing. And I think that would be a great foundation for a lot of us organizations to actually have, to look at these numbers so we can know where our programming can begin, where we can know where our outreach can actually begin, because we're seeing where the people are, and it's our jobs to meet people where they're at. So yeah, it contributes greatly. And we can benefit from having more numbers, basically.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a really interesting perspective when you talk about both, doing the research and finding what we can study and what those impacts are, especially now that music has changed so much and there's so many different ways to listen and participate. And then so that we can properly reinvest it, whether it's through development or other infrastructure. Jayne, do you want to dive in a little bit?
Yeah, so Memphis Tourism has extensive research on music as a travel motivator to the city, and it is in fact the #1 travel motivator for people to get here. And that looks like a lot of things. Music, of course, in Memphis looks like our legacy and our music attractions and our festivals. But when people are just coming even for the day or even for one night, oftentimes they end up on Beale Street or in a venue, in Midtown, or at Memphis Symphony Orchestra, at the Orpheum, at one of our many venues to see live music. And to James's point, paying attention to how much of that economic impact is going back into the creators of this art that has supported who we are as a city culturally for so long is something that we really need to dive deep into and make sure that we're doing everything that we can to increase, just pay for musicians and music industry.
For sure. Ken?
Well, I tend to tie it to the first topic, which was, being a forerunner in anything. You don't seem to get the, often my experience is you don't seem to get the financial benefit of that. Generally, there is living sort of on that front tip and the front edge. I'm not sure if I'm going the right direction in answering this, but as what I see as a forerunner in genre and talent and creative spirit, Memphis generally hasn't been appreciated from outside financially. It's been more taken, and then like James said, 20 years later, it becomes the thing. Well, it became the thing for somebody else. And a lot of times that money never made it to the forerunner who comes in. And so we're an entrepreneurial city in general, which is fantastic. I think, the place of growth could be some really strategic investment in those things that are entrepreneurial in the city and recognizing some small beginnings, which is my big push is for young people and the young creators, that are undiscovered and that kind of thing. So I tend to think that way, but I don't want to see another generation of the security guard that I've met that was the drummer on some record and never got paid, and these folks who are now retiring, penniless. We need to invest in the artists and change that for 20, 30, 40 years from now, make it be a celebration we can have.
Definitely. And last but not least, Robert.
Yeah, I mean, I'll start by saying, maybe the most optimistic thought that came to my mind, that I think Memphis is not even on the cusp, is into one of the coolest Renaissance experiences I've seen of any city where I've worked. I've had experiences working in multiple parts of the country, from Arizona to New York to Maine to North Carolina, and it's seeing Memphis back in 2005 when I first came, and seeing the number of buildings that were closed or empty or boarded up, versus now seeing the just huge amount of development that's happening. And music is ubiquitous. Music is a part of all of that. The word that keeps staying in my mind during this COVID time is creativity. It's really a good thing about being an artist. We're creative. And so music exists. At Crosstown, they built this, they took this old, what was it, Sears warehouse, and built this amazing new complete little mini city within a city. They put an auditorium there. Music is in the elevators, it's in the malls. So what I think is really important is that we communicate and we collaborate. We want to figure out new ways to connect genres of music, but organizations around the community, so that when we do look for where the money is going to go, that it doesn't funnel out of the Mid-South, but it stays around Memphis. We can pick we have a million ideas for a Pops concert at the Cannon Center. We've done a salute to Prince. We've done big Elvis Presley concerts. Last year we did a mammoth salute to David Porter and all of the music he was connected to writing. One of the best concerts maybe that probably has happened anywhere in the country with the Symphony Orchestra. And that way it kept everything, and we used all artists that were Memphis based or Memphis connected. So it kept everything here. I'm a big believer in communication and collaboration with even unexpected partners. And then finally, the members of the Memphis Symphony Orchestra. Anybody who's read the news has seen there have been years where there have been tight, really difficult financial times. Actually, knock wood, I'm proud to say this publicly. We're one of the only orchestras in the country that were in a good financial place right now and have been able to continue paying our players through their contract this year. Many orchestras laid their players off. So to go from being almost out of business not too many years ago to this kind of place, and those people, that violinist, that trumpet player. They live in our community. They are members of the orchestra, but they also teach private lessons. They're faculty or adjunct faculty at colleges and universities. They work in churches. They play gigs for recordings. They are part of the lifeblood. So the more we communicate, the more we collaborate, the better off it is for every guy who didn't get his check for playing a drum set. We have to figure out a way to, keep it here in our community.
Definitely. So seeing that, it's very important for our city. It drives tourism, it drives communication and collaboration with other cities. What is next? How can the future generations of musicians and change makers ensure to honor our city's legacy, but continue innovating and pushing that creative influence to put Memphis on the map? And I will start this one with Ken.
Well, I think the first thing, if we're going to take the legacy, we got to let students know. I mean, I've met, Memphis students who came to college here. They'd never heard of Stax. I don't know how that's possible. It's ridiculous. So we got to get better, music education in the school system, I guess, but we do have to, we need to connect generation to generation. I feel like, potentially, there's been a lack so long that there's a bit of something to overcome that I'm just talking out in space here. And, I'm becoming a generational person, older person, I guess. But it's the lack of contact between those people who have gone before and who have, and the younger folks. It's a lack of contact, and maybe still a little bit of when you have lack, it's hard to give, so I'm not even thinking of somebody in particular that's not giving from the older generation. I'm just saying there needs to be connection, like Robert said a minute ago, that communication between generations to pass that legacy on, because I'm a relationship guy. I think that's really ultimately how it's passed on. I saw, cool, in-school programs, writing poetry and studying music, those kind of things, those little initiatives that pop up around Memphis. And then I think helping young people get started entrepreneurially, because music is ultimately primarily self-employment and self-branding, and it's a business, and just getting more knowledge and tiny resources to get things going. I'm constantly a guy that just wants to see a little thing move. And if you have many little things move, you can have something very large move. And because people recognize the immense talent out of that 1 out of 1,000 student, young person.
Yeah.
But the other 100, 200 that ought to be doing music, they seeing that rise would be an important move to me to see the future go.
Interesting. Jayne?
Sorry. I think that exactly what Ken said. Honestly, I think that this goes for more than just music, but I think, people having communication cross generations is extremely important. And just being in community in general is something that we're lacking. So I definitely will I think you nailed it, Ken.
All right, Tonya.
So of course, this is one of my favorite topics, because this is exactly what we do at Memphis Slam Collaboratory. Of course, one of my newest favorite catchphrase is, of course, we are right on the edge of preservation and progression. And that means that, of course, by honoring the legacy of Memphis Slam and looking at his life and looking at his achievements and even his mistakes at some point, we're able to use those as teaching tools for current musicians to, again, look at the life and look at how he lived and how he had these different restrictions that they no longer have, so they can kind of frame their position within their own careers right now. I've always been a huge advocate of honoring our past legacy. As an artist myself, that was one of the reasons why I came to Memphis, of course, because of this deep legacy. And one of the things that I noticed that there has somewhat always been a disconnect. And I've noticed that not just in Memphis, but it's in music cities general, where the emphasis is heavily placed on the past, where the present and the future are kind of left questioning, where's my place in this? Where's my place? Like, how do I fit in? So there's a bit of contempt starts to develop, because they're always talking about the old songs and all the old songs and this and so on and so forth. But looking at our new artists juxtaposed against our older artists, positioning the newer artists to where they have access to this history, they have access to this information. In a lot of cases, especially with Memphis Collaboratory, because it is a collaboration laboratory, and the whole experiment is to put people in the same space to where people who normally wouldn't interact with each other do, in hopes that these type of dialogues, to where these stories can be passed down and shared. Or when I was your age, I was doing this, or I remember when I played this, or don't play that guitar, that brand is trash. Just anything that can come out, as far as sharing the stories and really just promoting that dialogue. That's something that I would really, really love to see here in Memphis, because there's a lot to learn from the past. A lot of people say, it's an old saying that says those who don't know their past are doomed to repeat it, in essence. So a lot of the pitfalls that we may have seen, with Memphis music, as far as labels falling apart, artists, bands disbanding and different things like that, a lot of this dialogue can help save a lot of future artists and present artists from a lot of this heartache, because they have these stories and they have these shared experiences that they don't necessarily have to learn themselves or suffer from that because other people did it. What's the quote? Shout out to Ruby Wilson. She said, Miss Ruby did it so you don't have to. That's essentially what it is. Like, they did this so we don't have to, in most cases. So it's great to know those stories and respect the path and that they've trailblazed for us to walk down so easily, because this trail wasn't clear. At one point, the trail had snakes and holes and all kinds of other stuff. And because of their sacrifice, we get to, move down this trail. And I just think it's important that we honor that.
Yeah, definitely. I think that cross-generational, guidance and education and mentorship is so important. Robert.
Sorry about that.
It's okay.
I had to just close the door really quickly.
Only venture.
Yeah. So, I have a couple thoughts. The first one about sort of how to move forward, how to keep seeing sort of success, however you want to measure that, moving forward. First of all, most every music organization, other than that handful of superstar artists, we don't come equipped with mammoth budgets. So I believe that a lot of what we do I believe the best work we do is retail. I think the best work we do in connecting is when we connect one-to-one. So for anyone there watching, listening, I would say anytime you want to, buy me a cup of coffee or I buy you one, I'm more than happy to talk about ideas and what's going on in music and how we can, as I said before, put interesting groups together. From those kind of conversations, came the orchestra playing with Lil Buck, doing the Swan. So that's the kind of thing that we want to happen. And thinking about being relevant, I think I don't want us to be the Memphis Symphony Orchestra that looks and sounds and behaves and does the exact same things as the New York Philharmonic or the Berlin Phil, because we're not in New York and we're not in Berlin. We're in Memphis, and those are great. What goes on in those places, someone else said, those are great what they're doing, but what we're doing is unique, and we want to be as relevant to the times as we can. There are a couple of levels of that. One, just as Tonya mentioned about sort of music and what older people or younger people think about older people's music. I mean, we're really stuck with this in the orchestral world. People hear the word orchestra. Yeah. They presume you have to wear a tux. They presume you have to be scared when to clap in the auditorium. We need to completely just kill all of those old Victorian sort of rules and procedures about classical music. They were good, I guess, in 1840. They have no place in 2020. If you come to our concert, please, if the music, when that finishes, clap, for Pete's sake. Yeah, we're sitting on stage and it's suddenly quiet, like, oh, that was not the end of the piece, you know? We don't want that anymore. We should use technology to our greatest advantage. And clearly, I just noticed that my virtual background is backwards. So clearly I'm not.
Not on ours, you look good.
Oh, good. So I'm not the guy to lead it, but we're incorporating a lot of video, a lot of text. Instead of just having people sit and listen to a piece of music, we're putting text above, sort of talking through what's going on, whether that's Beethoven or Bach or something written by a living composer. And this is the last thing I'll say, that the living composer part. Relevancy also means being connected to the time and the culture and the news and the spirit of what's going on. My job as a musician, I have very strong opinions about politics and religion. I'm not going to share those, but my job as a musician on one level is not just to make pretty music that you think is, oh, isn't that nice? My job is musicians and composers have created lyrics and operas and plays and theater to make us think about things that are going on. There's a piece by Joel Thompson. It's been done once in Memphis 2 years ago. We're going to plan to do it again with the Memphis Symphony. It's called The 7 Last Words of the Unarmed. It's a take on a piece by Haydn, The 7 Last Words of Christ. Important work in the music and Christian liturgy. 7 Last Words of the Unarmed are the 7 last words of 7 Black men who lost their lives because of I'm searching for a word, because of the stupidity or idiocy of a police officer, but really because of an entire civilization that's got a lot of this wrong, and that 160 years later, we're still fighting the Civil War. And I also admit I feel silly talking about it as a white male, but I need to learn. I need to sort of own and be remorseful for the things that I've done and apologize. But I also need to learn, and then I need to figure out a way, and all of us, to put art out there that will get people talking about these things. Not planning to bring an answer, not planning to necessarily make a convert, but get people talking about it. Music sometimes should be beautiful. It sometimes should be fun. It sometimes should be the best way to spend an evening on Beale Street. Music should also be, and it has been for thousands of years, something that gets you thinking and talking. I would much rather you be angry at a concert we do, or thrilled at a concert, than lukewarm at a concert.
Yeah, that's a good point about, inspiring passion and keeping that moving, no matter what that is.
That's how I think we can really be relevant and uniquely relevant to Memphis and our story.
And James, last but not least for this one, how can we continue innovating into the future as we move through new generations? I know you're very into this with working with all of your artists. Yeah.
Honestly, for me, the ground floor of it is simply to create opportunities I did not have. That's where everything starts. That's the seed and foundation of all of my ideas. Is I think about, and if I can be ultra real, I'm a Black man in a very Black city that didn't feel represented at all here growing up. And it was the seed for me wanting to leave here and eventually leaving here when I did. And so when I think back to 18, 17, 16-year-olds here, I think about all the things that I wish I had. I didn't just wish that I had opportunities to learn and grow. I wish that I had more people who looked like me that would help me do that. I wish that I had more opportunities to do that in the community I grew up in, which it was non-existent. We barely have a grocery store now. So, these are the things that I think about. I think it's impossible. I think there's a real problem if we talk about moving forward and building without addressing huge potholes in this city right now. Huge potholes in what is funded, whether it be a whole bunch of money or even a little money. Some things aren't funded at all. We talk about the availability of said support. We talk about what that support looks like. And we can't deny that what it looks like matters. You know, that to me, it's all about creating opportunities that I didn't have. I would say the second part of that is to take on the next level of what it is to be an artist. You know, I'm one of the few people, I dwell in a lot of rooms, whether it be rooms with musicians, rooms with administrators, rooms with leaders and organizers. And I do feel like I have a responsibility, being that I have experiences in almost all of those rooms that are very true to my life as a grown up as a Black man in the city. And so for me, I feel a personal obligation to establish the next level, to do my part amongst the whole community of people, to establish the next level of what it is to maintain our culture, which starts with ownership.
Yeah.
Right? It starts with ownership. At the end of the day, there's only so much I can help somebody else get it right. And there's only so much explaining. It's so exhausting trying to explain what it is to grow up in this city as a musician, as an artist, as a creative, in poverty, and understand what are the things that need to be supported and not supported and how that affects people. And at some point, you just got to consider, man, maybe we should do it.
Yeah.
You know?
Why not Memphis?
Yeah. And I think that's in the Memphis spirit is maybe we should do it. And so for me, that's when I think about the future and innovation, I think it's the artist becomes more than the artist. I think it's we take control, not lean so heavily on asking somebody to understand our plight. We just do what's necessary to advance at the hands of ourselves.
Those are
I think that's how we maintain and that's how we grow it. I think as long as I'm having to explain my problem over and over again, I don't know how much longer I can do that.
No, that's a really good point, especially, given recent events. So I guess we have time probably for one more question before we jump in. So I certainly don't want to ignore what's happening in the world around us currently. So given the current climate with COVID-19 and all that has endeavored, how has that changed the way that Memphis is approaching music? And what is it truly important for each of our audience members to consider in supporting our musicians and supporting our music industry right now? And let's start this one with Tonya.
Well, of course, live music. Memphis is a live music city. People like to go and congregate and partake in the enjoyment of music together as a collective unit. And, COVID is telling us to do the exact opposite. Social distancing doesn't allow us to go to concerts, doesn't allow us to go to our favorite venues, doesn't allow us to even go, to our favorite outdoor venues or anything like that. It's just, it kind of has reshaped the way we look at music and how we take in music. So of course, now you're seeing more streaming and different things as far as how the people are receiving it, which is funny because artists had already started doing that, from really the inception of social media. The whole point was to gather this art, use this platform to gather people and kind of shepherd them into your talent, into what you have to offer. And now everything's shifted. You're seeing people going online more and doing more concerts. What I would really love to see is more artists doing original music, because that's going to be the way that they finally monetize different things. Of course, with the social media platforms, especially reinforcing and doubling down on their rules as far as restrictions, licensing, and just overall music restrictions and what can be streamed online, what can be played online. It's always been my suggestion, again, to have your own platform, to figure out a way to develop yourself, use social media as a booster or a way to rein people in to this network that you created and can maintain for yourself. And COVID is really forcing that, whether it be, how we take in music, how we receive it, how we deliver our music, how we reach these new audiences, even with organizations and branding. How do we engage? How do we engage with our normal audiences? And how do we present this in a format, that works? Because again, this is something that's difficult too, and kind of touching on what James had stated earlier about the about the downside, and looking at, again, the poverty and addressing certain things, looking at the technology gap here, and the fact that a huge percentage of the people in Memphis don't have access to the internet. How are they going to get our music? If they're artists and they don't have access to the internet like that, how are they going to get their talent out? So again, this pandemic has really caused, us as a city, and I think globally, it's really caused people to kind of just look at what was the current way of doing things, and this whole getting back to normal. It's like, what is this normal we're trying to get back to? Because the more we deviate from it, the more we realize it wasn't as functional as we thought it was, because it would be working for us right now, and we wouldn't have to revamp if it was an all-inclusive plan that was a little bit more thought out. And in some cases, a lot of things are outdated and different things like that. So again, I think COVID-19 really snapped us into this thinking and whipped us into the future of thinking, as far as how do we deviate from this traditional sense that hasn't always worked, and create something better that's more conducive, for the creators as well as for the, the listeners. And so that's something that I'm looking forward to, just seeing and being a part of those type of dialogues over the next month, seeing what the, creative minds, like the rest of the panelists here, some of the innovation that comes from this. I'm looking forward to seeing the websites and the apps and, everything else. I used the Unapologetic app as an example last night of some people who had already had, started moving in that direction, and really kind of, I'm not really foreseeing the pandemic, but foreseeing a case to where you would need to rein your artists in, and how do you pull those people in closer? Because right now artists need that support, and they need the closeness of the audience in an age where closeness is kind of prohibited at this point.
Yeah, no, it definitely seems like as things become more apparent, that there is a drive for innovation, and how do we drive solutions together as a city? Whether I'm heavily involved or whether I'm sitting back in my 9-to-5 job, and I'm excited to see the innovations as well. I want to make sure we give the audience time to ask some questions. So let's hear from Jayne on this one, and then we can jump into that.
Okay, yeah, so I think COVID, as Tonya said already, has really kind of changed the game for everyone, but for musicians who are gig workers, they have absolutely no income right now, and for us as a community to rally around them and give them any kind of resources we have on how to apply for gig worker unemployment services, or if you have resources on how to start a merchandise store, or can give some sort of law advice. Honestly, there's a big gap, obviously, in resources here in the city. But I think that a lot of musicians don't know that there is a way for them to get compensation during this time that's outside of just showing up to a venue and playing music. So as much as we can spread that word, I think we'll be in a better place when we come out on the other side of it.
Definitely. So kind of relevant, and I'll let y'all hop in for who wants to take this one. But we had one question from Duncan Williams that said, what can the business community, so outside of individuals, what can our businesses do to help during this time? James, you want to take it?
What can businesses do to help during the COVID-19 pandemic?
Yes.
Oh, it's a tough one. Can I pass on that? Let me
Yep.
give me a second to think about that.
All right, Ken, do you have any ideas for that one?
Yeah, I have. I think just part of that last question ties into this. My answer was going to be generally around businesses. There's an opportunity but, and I, speak about this a lot, there's a lower entry level than we think. And if I have 77 people listening to my voice saying this answer, I would just say, you can make a difference in your business or your personal time to a musician through the skills you already have, because musicians and creators don't have your skills. They do need all those skills, alongside creating the tiniest business is the one person, musician. So I think every person listening can do something very simple to help musicians be encouraged to keep creating and get access to technology and all the things, so starting somewhere small. I think businesses generally, I think, could encourage their employees, double donations to music organizations, match the kind of hours of work and community service they encourage their employees to do, to help music and Memphis oriented artists get out of, work on your accounting or your marketing or some talent, and let that bleed outside the 9 to 5 that we, kind of say normally. Let it bleed outside there, or invite artists to your location. We've sent students to banks to sing and all that. Now, when they said stop singing this weekend at COVID, I was like, okay, let's just quit living. Okay, can't sing. But until, as long as we can still, sing one person to another, invite artists around, business people, let them get to hear the story, because ultimately it's live music and it's merch, and the merch is really telling your story or something interesting, just having that brand built up. And that's not that hard for a marketing person or a teacher. Well, teachers work too hard already. But anyway, somebody to work outside their zone and get to know artists and work on that branding for Memphis. Very little money can start someone down the road to getting out of the cycle of just not believing they should do it anymore. That's what I see every day. Teenagers writing music, and it's like, it's phenomenal. How can you write more? Just giving up. So sorry, I'll stop there.
No, that's great. I think you covered many of the big ones: investment, volunteering time, doubling donations, all of that. And we have one more question, and that was, how would a person, specifically a young person, find the jobs and the training for those behind the scenes opportunities in the music industry? And I'm not sure if that was to Tonya's point earlier when you had talked a little bit about that, about how there are all those opportunities. So I'll let you take that one.
Okay. Well, yeah, if you would allow me to just make a quick point on how corporations can also participate, and then I'll jump into that question as well. Don't be afraid to think outside of the box. If you're a corporate entity, we are a Memphis city. Music city. Excuse me. We are a Memphis city too, but we're a music city. And so do not be afraid to think out of the box. If you see an artist that is doing something within the lines of something that a resource that you have, offer yourself up. A lot of times, this is the thing, you don't necessarily have to write a huge check, even though I am not fighting huge checks here, so don't interpret that. But sometimes that isn't necessary. Artists need resources. A lot of times we need access to certain things that we may not get to, be able to get to. The point that I mentioned before, technology. If you're a company that has access to a lot of this stuff, reach out to musicians, invite musicians to share that platform that you've had and that you're paying for. Those type of things make a difference. And I can guarantee you, if everyone kind of thought in those type of things, where what is the small thing that I can do? What is this thing that I can jump in and do that that I'm really good at? How can I use this to help other people? If everyone thought like that, then you would see Memphis, in this sense of like other, larger music cities like Atlanta or Philadelphia, because essentially that's what they did. There was no organized movement of, hey, we're all going to put ourselves on right now. No, everyone collectively worked on their stuff. And then the people who saw them doing great things were like, hey, let me help you. And so like in Atlanta, you had these strong brands like a Coca-Cola and like, different things like that were jumping in and seeing where they can do these small things, because they saw that as an asset and they believed in investing in their city, which meant they invested into the culture of their city, which meant that they invested into the music of their city. So let's revisit those conversations and figure out exactly how corporations can help. But as far as the youth being involved, there's so many different organizations, depending on how, what your age range is. If you are in elementary school, high school range, there's a wonderful organization here by the name of Memphis Music Initiative. That basically they do two different things. They help build a platform of retention for artists, because what they do is employ artists to go into the schools with struggling music programs and non-existent music programs, and they employ these artists to teach during the daytime on a part-time basis that still gives them enough money to pay their bills and to not struggle, but then also frees them up at night to where they can gig and still work on their craft. So those types of organizations, of course, feed into a lot of organizations like Slim House, like Stax Music Academy, like Black Arts Alliance, like Prism Ensemble, like so many Unapologetic Youth, like so many different, youth initiatives that are designed. So I would say, start talking to, any of them. If someone has a question of anything, if it's something that directly deals with Slim House that I can help you with, if not, I probably know who I can direct you to. So please feel free to reach out to me if you have a young person, or, have someone that's interested in music, especially the back end, because that's something that we specifically work on, is teaching the management aspects, the back end stuff, the production, the, all that type of stuff, like those things that aren't necessarily in the limelight, but are essential to the proper functioning of a music industry in a city. So again, I make myself available. I love talking to young people. And again, like what Jayne said, I really try to be what I did not have growing up. And so I didn't have anyone to talk to. I knew what I wanted to do, but there was no one that I could have access to that was doing it. So I kind of had to create my own way. So essentially I would love to, be that point person if I can help in any way, or at least direct their path. And please, 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 ask me, any questions that you have about that personally.
Yes, thank you. So I will encourage also, if any of our panelists today are open to having folks in both the business community and just individuals interested in the sector and reaching out to them, feel free to drop your emails in the chat so that everyone can have that. And we've also compiled a few different ways that, we hope that y'all activate after this luncheon. So we can jump into that a little bit. Before I do, I want to make sure that I thank our very generous sponsors one more time, First Horizon Foundation and Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee. They are always so amazing in supporting all of our work, and so that y'all can hear from these amazing panelists. And thank you also to our panelists for taking the time today, and to being adaptive and doing this all from Zoom. It's been great. So I do want to highlight that if you're interested in hearing from Memphis musicians and you're not sure where to start, Jayne Ellen White has compiled this Memphis 2020 playlist, all with new music and all who are Memphis artists. It's what was playing at the beginning as you were logging into this panel today, so feel free to check that out. So ways that you can very easily, help our artists right now, you can give your attention. That is what our artists need to start building their brand and growing their platforms and reaching new audiences. So Visible Music College has a radio station you can plug into. You can visit the Memphis Tourism Music Hub or the We Are Memphis Music site, and those connect you to both artists. They have artist resources if you're a musician. The Unapologetic World app, I know Tonya mentioned earlier, it is free to download in whatever app store you need to download from, and they do a lot of different performances and all sorts of different things. So whether you're in Memphis or abroad, you can stay connected. And lastly, if you want to just pretend you're at the Levitt Show all summer while they have their virtual concert series, you can set up a picnic in your backyard and pretend that you're there. And as we've touched on, you can really help by investing in our musicians in our city, and there's several different ways you can do that. Music Export Memphis has a COVID relief fund that goes directly to our musicians. If you're a musician, their next deadline to apply for that is June 3rd, so be sure to look. And if you want to support our musicians, you can very easily go to musicexportmemphis.com/COVID and donate. You can purchase some merch, so if musicians have any that you want to buy, now's a great time, particularly while we can't do live performances. And as I've seen a lot of folks discuss in the chat already, you can hire a local musician or DJ to play at your virtual event. I saw someone mention that Memphis Music Initiative was really great to connect folks, and I've seen it at quite a few different events, and it makes it way more fun and enjoyable for everyone. Last but not least, before you leave, you want to hold up your phone camera and give us some feedback. This is our first virtual event, so we'd love to learn more about what we can do better, what you liked, what you didn't like. Yeah, so thank you all for being here today. Thank you again to our panelists and to our sponsors, First Horizon Foundation and Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee. And I hope y'all have a good rest of your day.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, I'm going to close out of our meeting. So thank you all one more time. It was so great to have y'all today.
Thank you.
Thank y'all. It was great.